There is a time in Arizona when the desert changes ownership. All day the sun controls everything. The pavement burns. Metal becomes too hot to touch. Shadows shrink. The landscape looks empty, almost defeated by the heat. Then the light begins to fall. The temperature drops just enough for movement to return. Birds call again. Bats appear above washes. Coyotes cross roads. Insects rise from the ground. Restaurants fill. Patios reopen. Cars begin moving towards Scottsdale. And on one night in late August, thousands of people follow the same instinct. They wait for the sun to go down. Then the bass starts. This is Night Trip Festival Arizona, a one-night festival of house, tech house, and techno held at WestWorld of Scottsdale, running from evening deep into the night. At first glance, the formula looks familiar. DJs, lights, a huge crowd in a desert city. But Arizona gives it a different logic. The Sonoran Desert changes dramatically after sunset. Animals that avoided the worst heat begin to move. And modern Scottsdale follows its own version of that rhythm as restaurants, clubs, and event spaces fill after dark. In most places, night is decoration. In Arizona, night is infrastructure. So this is not only a film about an electronic music festival. It is about a city built in one of the hottest landscapes in North America, a place that survived by controlling water, escaping heat, and constantly reinventing itself. From indigenous desert homeland, to farm settlement, to cowboy town, to resort city, to nightlife destination. And once a year, Night Trip compresses that entire Arizona logic into a few hours. Wait through the heat, turn on the lights, and let the desert wake up. To understand the festival, begin before the music. Begin with the land. Scottsdale sits in the Sonoran Desert, immediately east of Phoenix, at the foot of the McDowell Mountains. This is not the kind of desert many people imagine. It is not an endless blank of sand. The Sonoran is biologically rich. Saguaros rise like columns above rocky slopes. Palo Verde trees hold green in their bark. Mesquite roots search deep for moisture. Ocotillos can look almost dead until rain arrives and suddenly covers them in leaves. The landscape has spent millions of years learning how to survive one problem: too much sun and not enough reliable water. And survival here often means timing. Many desert animals avoid the most dangerous hours of the day. Some shelter underground. Some rest in shade. Some become active at dusk or at night. Bats leave their roosts. Owls begin hunting. Rodents move across the ground. Scorpions search for prey. Coyotes become easier to hear than to see. The desert does not become empty in the heat. It becomes hidden. Then night reveals what was waiting. Sometimes the desert literally blooms after sunset. Saguaro flowers open at night, and nectar-feeding bats can carry pollen between them. Creatures that spent the day sheltered under rock, vegetation, or underground begin to move. The Arizona postcard has an entire second shift that many visitors barely notice. That is the useful connection to Night Trip. The festival is artificial, commercial, and technologically elaborate, but it arrives at the hour when the surrounding desert is changing too. That rhythm existed long before Scottsdale, and humans understood the desert's limits too. People have lived in and moved through this region for thousands of years. The archaeological record around what is now Scottsdale includes evidence of earlier indigenous communities, including people associated with the Hohokam tradition, who created extensive irrigation systems across the Salt River Valley. That is one of the great engineering stories of the American desert. Water from rivers was moved through canals across land that otherwise looked too dry for intensive agriculture. The desert did not become easy. People learned how to work with its limits, and that principle, control water, control timing, build around climate, would shape nearly everything that came later. Modern Scottsdale began with water before it began with luxury. In the 1880s, the Arizona Canal opened new agricultural possibilities in the Salt River Valley. In 1888, U.S. Army chaplain Winfield Scott purchased 640 acres near what is now the center of Scottsdale. He saw agricultural potential where outsiders saw desert. The settlement that grew around the area eventually took his name. Early Scottsdale was not a city of nightclubs, resorts, and luxury shopping. It was agricultural: citrus, cotton, farms, ranches. People were betting that irrigation could turn desert land into productive land. Water made that possible. Then Scottsdale began discovering that the desert itself could be sold as an experience. Health seekers came for the climate. Artists came for the landscape. Guest ranches appeared. The myth of the American West became part of the town's identity. By the middle of the 20th century, Scottsdale had adopted a slogan that sounds almost too perfect to be real: the West's most Western town. It promoted cowboy imagery, horse culture, parades, ranch life, architecture designed to look connected to the desert. Tourism became increasingly important. And then, one of the most famous architects in American history arrived and did something that helped change the way people thought about building in Arizona. Frank Lloyd Wright came to the foothills of the McDowell Mountains. In 1937, he established Taliesin West. Wright did not try to make the desert disappear. He used local stone, low horizontal lines, open views, buildings that seemed to grow out of the landscape rather than simply sit on top of it. Whether people love his architecture or not, the idea was powerful. Do not pretend Arizona is somewhere else. Build for Arizona. That idea would echo across Scottsdale for decades, but Scottsdale was changing quickly. In 1951, Scottsdale incorporated with a population of only a little over 2,000 people. Then the metropolitan Phoenix area exploded. Roads expanded. Air conditioning became essential infrastructure. Suburbs spread across land that had once been farms and open desert. Scottsdale grew northward. Resorts multiplied. Golf courses appeared. Restaurants, art galleries, shopping districts, luxury homes, corporate offices. By the late 20th century, the cowboy town had become something much harder to describe. Part Western mythology, part resort, part suburb, part art city, part desert preserve, part nightlife machine. Today, Scottsdale receives millions of visitors each year. Old Town can move through several identities in a single day. Morning coffee, art galleries, tourists photographing Western storefronts, afternoon shopping, dinner. Then, after dark, another city takes over. Music grows louder. Lines form outside clubs. Rooftops fill. Cars move through streets that were quiet hours earlier. That transition matters because it mirrors the desert. Daytime Scottsdale and nighttime Scottsdale are not quite the same place, and Night Trip pushes that transformation to its extreme. But before it became a festival venue, WestWorld had its own Arizona identity: horses. WestWorld of Scottsdale sits in the northern part of the city, near the McDowell Mountains. It began in the early 1980s as a city-owned venue with deep equestrian roots. That history fits Scottsdale perfectly. For decades, horses had been central to the city's Western image. The Scottsdale Arabian Horse Show, first held in the area in the 1950s, became one of the signature events associated with the city. WestWorld eventually developed into a massive event complex with exhibit halls, arenas, and infrastructure designed to absorb very large crowds. Horse shows, auto auctions, trade events, and sporting competitions all fit here. And now, electronic music does too. Night Trip 2026 is scheduled inside WestWorld's North Hall. That detail matters. The festival is branded around Arizona after dark, but the core experience is closer to a giant temporary nightclub dropped inside an equestrian and exhibition complex. A venue associated with horses and Western pageantry becomes a controlled room of sub-bass, light-emitting diode walls, moving beams, and thousands of dancers. The saddles disappear, the lasers arrive. Only the obsession with spectacle remains. begins. Night Trip Arizona takes place on August 29, 2026. The official event is scheduled at WestWorld of Scottsdale, with the night beginning at 6 p.m. and running until 2 a.m. It is an 18-plus event, with very important person areas for older attendees. The musical center is house music, and its deeper, harder relatives, tech house and techno. That choice matters, because house music was built around repetition. A kick drum returns, then returns again. The rhythm is simple enough to understand physically before you understand anything else about the music. The body predicts what is coming. The beat arrives. The prediction is rewarded again, again, again. And somewhere in that repetition, time starts behaving differently. 10 minutes can feel like 2. A 1-hour set can feel like a continuous piece of movement. The individual song matters less than the flow between songs. That is why a good house set is not simply a playlist. It is architecture. Energy rises, drops, returns. Crowds compress and release, and the environment becomes part of the music. At Night Trip, that environment is Arizona after dark. The brand sells the feeling as house music under the stars. But in Arizona, the core experience is built inside North Hall, a controlled temporary nightclub surrounded by desert heat, night air, and WestWorld's massive event grounds. Because in Scottsdale, darkness is not just aesthetic, it is relief. Arizona heat is not decorative background. Late August in the Phoenix metropolitan area can remain extremely hot after sunset because pavement and buildings release heat stored through the day. That is why practical details matter. The festival tells attendees to follow weather reports and prepare accordingly, and its rules explicitly allow hydration packs, reusable water bottles, and personal misting fans. The climate is not part of the stage design. It is a logistical reality surrounding the event. By the time the crowd is deep inside North Hall, however, the daytime city outside feels very far away. Then the lights take over. Electronic music festivals depend heavily on visual design because sound alone does not fill a huge physical space. Light-emitting diode walls, moving beams, lasers, smoke, color, screens, stage structures, everything is designed to turn invisible sound into something the eye can follow. A bass drop becomes light, a rhythm becomes motion, a transition becomes darkness, and then sudden brightness. In a club, the walls contain that effect. In Arizona, the contrast is larger. Beyond the walls is desert darkness. No green forest, no ocean, no dense downtown skyline. Just a giant event space surrounded by the night desert. That emptiness gives light more power. A beam looks brighter when there is less around it. A stage looks larger when darkness removes everything behind it. The desert does what a theater designer would do on purpose. It clears the background. And suddenly WestWorld, built to display horses and host exhibitions, becomes almost abstract. Sound, light, movement, heat, dust, bodies. For a few hours, Scottsdale's Western identity disappears under something futuristic. And this year, Night Trip was lit up by scenes like these. This is the place to show the strongest visual material from the 2026 festival. The most memorable outfits, crowd shots, stage design, lasers, performers, and wide shots of WestWorld after dark. Because the visual contrast is one of the event's strongest triggers. Daytime Arizona is beige, gold, and white. Night Trip turns it electric. The lineup reinforces that idea. And the 2026 lineup is not generic. Cloonee brings the stripped, rolling tech house sound that has made him one of the most visible names in the genre. Lorenzo pushes the night toward the heavier bass-driven side of house. SIDEPIECE and OMNOM sit closer to the playful, high-impact festival end of tech house. Loco Dice brings a deeper club lineage shaped by house and techno. They share the bill with Marco Strauss, Chase West, Discipe, Welker, Valerie Stoss, Peachy Keen, Ragey Band, and Tommy Toole. That range tells you what Night Trip is trying to be. This is not a multi-genre festival where a rock band, a rapper, and an electronic dance music headliner compete for attention. The night stays tightly centered on house, tech house, and techno. So the difference comes from groove, pressure, and pacing rather than radical genre changes. The ticket structure reinforces the club style identity. General admission and, very important, person are joined by a limited stage access option, which includes access behind the scenes from the artist's perspective, expedited entry, and dedicated bar and bathroom areas. That stage access allocation is already sold out. Even the official list of allowed items tells you what kind of crowd the organizers expect. Glow sticks are permitted. Illuminated costumes and jewelry are permitted. Light-emitting diode whips, poise, and orbitals are permitted. Hydration packs and personal misting fans are permitted. That combination also gives the crowd a visual language before the stage even turns on. This is not a festival where everyone is watching one singer at the front. The dance floor itself becomes part of the picture. Light-up jewelry moves through the room. Light-emitting diode props cut small patterns through the haze. Handmade signs rise above groups of friends. Some people dress for the heat outside. Others build entire looks around fluorescent fabric, reflective surfaces, and anything that reacts to stage light. And WestWorld offers another level of contrast. The same complex that can host Arabian horses, collector cars, or a trade show can be reprogrammed almost overnight. The North Hall does not need to resemble a permanent nightclub, because that is the point. Sound systems, lighting rigs, screens, barriers, and temporary bars arrive, create a world, and then vanish. Night Trip belongs to Insomniac's wider Day Trip family, but the Arizona version deliberately shifts the mood. Day Trip is associated with bright outdoor house music and summer daylight. Night Trip keeps the house foundation and turns the palette darker, later, and more club-driven. In Scottsdale, that identity becomes especially clear because the event begins with the desert still visible outside and reaches its full intensity only after the city has disappeared behind the walls of the hall. House music itself has an unusual relationship with place. It began in clubs, not stadiums, not concert halls. Clubs. Spaces where a disc jockey could control time for hours and where dancing mattered more than watching a traditional band perform. The roots of house music are tied to Chicago's club culture in the late 20th century, particularly Black and Latino queer communities who built spaces around dance, repetition, and freedom. Techno developed differently, with Detroit becoming one of its defining centers. Over time, these styles spread far beyond the cities that created them. Warehouses, beaches, deserts, Ibiza, Berlin, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and now a huge event complex in Scottsdale. That journey is part of what makes Night Trip visually strange. Music born in dense urban nightlife now works perfectly in open desert darkness. Why? Because the music does not require a story on stage. It creates an environment. And the desert is already an environment powerful enough to feel like a character. There is another connection hidden inside the word trip. Electronic music narrows attention. Inside the hall, the visual world becomes whatever production chooses to illuminate. The stage, the person beside you, a moving beam, a screen, a sudden burst of color. Add repetitive rhythm and synchronized light, and an ordinary exhibition hall becomes immersive without needing a conventional narrative. That does not mean everyone experiences it the same way. Some people come to dance. Some come for a specific artist. Some come because friends invited them. Some come because they want the spectacle. Some spend half the night filming. Others barely look at their phones. But thousands of separate reasons become one crowd. That is one of the oldest tricks humans know. Gather after dark, create rhythm, create light, move together. The technology is modern. The instinct is not. Night Trip is not an ancient ritual in modern clothing. It is a commercial electronic event with tickets, security, branding, and enormous amounts of technology. But the ingredients are familiar: repetition, crowd movement, anticipation, and release. The machinery is new. The nervous system is not. Scottsdale itself has always survived by reinvention. First, water made agriculture possible. Then ranching and Western identity helped make the town marketable. Then architecture and art gave it another layer. Then resorts, golf, luxury tourism, nightlife, mass events. Each version could have erased the previous one. Instead, Scottsdale stacked them. You can still see horses. You can still visit historic Old Town. You can still walk through Desert Preserve. You can still see the influence of Frank Lloyd Wright. And you can spend Saturday night under lasers listening to Tech House. That mixture is not an accident. It is the modern Southwest, a place where preservation and spectacle constantly negotiate with each other. Perhaps nowhere is that clearer than around the McDowell Sonoran Preserve. Scottsdale grew aggressively northward through the late 20th century. Development pressure increased. Residents pushed to protect large areas of the McDowell Mountains and surrounding desert. The result became one of the largest urban preserves in the United States. So a city famous for luxury development also preserved tens of thousands of acres of Sonoran Desert. Scottsdale does not resolve those contradictions. It lives inside them. Cowboy imagery beside nightlife. Aggressive development beside protected desert, equestrian history beside electronic music. And that is why WestWorld is such an interesting stage. Stand there during the day, and the venue makes sense as infrastructure, parking, roads, exhibit space, arenas, concrete, metal, a giant machine for events. But after dark, scale becomes harder to read. The practical venue disappears behind production. A wall becomes a screen. An arena becomes a dance floor. A parking route becomes a river of headlights. People who spent the day moving through Scottsdale now choose to pack into one enormous indoor room. That sounds irrational until the music begins, because festivals are built around temporary worlds. For one night, normal priorities are suspended. Nobody came to WestWorld because it is intimate. They came because thousands of other people came too. The crowd is part of the attraction. So is the volume. So is the light. So is the fact that tomorrow morning almost all of it will be gone. Temporary experiences can feel intense precisely because they cannot last. At 2 in the morning, the final sets end. Lights come up. The crowd begins low toward exits. The giant shared experience fractures instantly into thousands of private trips home. And Scottsdale returns. By morning, the desert has control again. Sunlight reaches the pavement. The mountains become visible. The stage looks like equipment. The night that felt endless turns out to have lasted only a few hours. That is the strange power of this festival. It does not transform Arizona permanently. It borrows Arizona temporarily. It waits for the one part of the day when the desert loosens its grip, fills that window with sound and light, and disappears before the next afternoon can burn everything flat again. And that is why the name Night Trip is better than it first sounds. The trip is not only the music, it is the transition, day to night, heat to movement, western town to electronic city, horse arena to dance floor, empty desert to thousands of people, then back again. Arizona has always been built around transitions like these. Water turns desert into farmland. Air conditioning turns brutal summers into metropolitan life. Tourism turns landscape into economy. Preservation turns threatened land into protected land. Night turns heat into possibility. And Night Trip turns that possibility into a festival. The most interesting thing may happen before the first disc jockey and after the last one. At sunset, everybody is waiting for the same signal, not from the stage, from the sky. The sun drops behind the horizon. The light changes. The temperature begins its slow fall. Arizona releases the day, and a city famous for controlling the desert does something different. For one night, it follows the desert's schedule. That is the real story. Night Trip is not powerful because Scottsdale becomes something completely unnatural. It works because, beneath all the speakers and lasers, the event obeys one of the oldest rules in this landscape. When the sun is strongest, survive. When darkness comes, move. The coyotes know it, the bats know it, the scorpions know it, and on August 29th, thousands of people at WestWorld will know it too. They will arrive while there is still light. They will watch the desert disappear. The bass will get louder. The crowd will become harder to separate into individuals. And for a few hours, one of America's hottest metropolitan landscapes will feel built entirely for the night. Then the music will stop. The lights will go dark. The desert will still be there, waiting for sunrise. Before you go, tell me what would pull you into a desert night festival. The music, the lights, the heat, or the crowd? Write music, lights, heat, or crowd in the comments. And if you want more stories about the places, festivals, and hidden sides of America that most travelers never see, subscribe to the channel.